we have to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We human beings have endowed with us abilities to connect telepathically and to do this within the medium that we are immersed in, which is this reality that we live in, this matrix or whatever you want to call it. We have the ability to tune into certain frequencies. And when we do that, we have a two-way communication between.
Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. It's John Nolan here. Look who's with me today, finally, for the second episode of The Naked Truth. Frank Jacob, how you doing, brother?
Good to be here. Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you doing, brother? You've been awfully busy.
Yeah, I don't that seems to be a constant. So I'm very good. It's an exciting time. We have lots to talk about, and as always, Frank, even when we're not in touch for a couple of weeks, we end up exactly at the same place in history, and then we always laugh about it. You wrote me a message when you saw the series we did on religion. You said, why, where are you at?
I was on a deep dive, John, and I was for the webinar, right? The new webinar that's coming out that we touched on briefly last time. And it's, for me, this is going to be something which is going to really break a lot of boundaries and really go at the great big picture in a totally unique and new way that's, of course, got to involve, on the one hand, history. As you know, that's kind of my pet subject, aside from the secret space crazy stuff and, all this other human paranormal potential stuff. But the idea of correcting and revising incorrect history is something that I really wanted to dive into. But then, when you look at that, it's like, well, it's not just about why this keeps happening. It's about where's the root of all this. There's got to be some meta narrative, and that's where, of course, beliefs come in, and religion is, of course, connected to that. So, and I just finished making a teaser and all this stuff. We can maybe play that a bit later. And I come up and I turn on the web again. Once in a while I clink out for a couple of days, and lo and behold, you are online talking about the end of religion. I just had to laugh. I mean, I don't know, man. It's scary.
Yeah, and I know you said, I don't know if I should laugh or if I should cry, but here's the thing. This has been going on for years now, where you and I are this way, and we tend to be exactly, and sometimes freakishly so, because some of these subjects are not out there in
No.
this big way. And then you go and you turn around and say, "Oh my God, like this is starting to come up everywhere." What do you think that synchronicity is? I mean, because we've talked about it. Is it a natural phenomenon? Could it also be infused? Are these thoughts infused into us? What do you think?
This is a key topic that you're touching on here, because on the one hand, there's absolute proof and evidence that this kind of thing can be induced from outside. And yet, on the other hand, we have to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We human beings have endowed with us abilities to connect telepathically and to do this within the medium that we are immersed in, which is this reality that we live in, this matrix or whatever you want to call it. We have the ability to tune into certain frequencies. And when we do that, we have a two-way communication between our mind and what's going on, and this field, this field that's like a source field. There's different ways to describe it. The Schumann frequencies, you could say, are part of it. The Earth's magnetosphere, it's a storage place, like a giant hard drive. What are hard drives but magnetic hard drives, right? Magnetized energy as a way of storing energy and storing thoughts as well, because thoughts are also frequency and energy. So the fact that you and I are touching on these things without even talking to each other is only, for me in this case, just substantiation that we're vibrating on a certain frequency, both of us, and because of that we're coming into terrain which is part of that frequency, and that includes this kind of information. It has to be. There's no other explanation for me.
No, I totally agree, and I think when you're conscious of all the possibilities, the consciousness in and of itself, and its communication with all of consciousness, right? I mean, we're talking about the concept of creation and a field of information, like you say, that is authentic and real, versus a cloud that is also out there and that is also constantly trying to communicate with us. And of course, our communication, because it's so much intertwined with technology now, what I do, and this is because I know a lot of our viewers are having similar thoughts around this, I try to break patterns, just simply so, because I realized that if a thought, a concept comes from an authentic place, if it's the real two-way communication, it doesn't matter for that communication whether it comes through the internet or whether it comes through a book or a random conversation. But I try to break patterns, so I know I'm not, I'm kind of trying to exclude the possibility that that something is being infused. And I do think, as researchers and as people who speak to greater audiences, that's a huge responsibility, that we make sure that we are not getting misled, misguided, and also the bias, right? I mean, and I want to talk a little bit about that. How do you ever have that moment when you are deep in a topic where you want to step out and you try to take the 40-foot thousand view, just to make sure you're not getting too locked into one way of thinking, and you're not
Yeah,
looking at other facts that might contradict that way of thinking?
I think you have to, because if this is the danger that we see manifested out there when we run into people that are into a certain conspiracy theory, and they just focus on it in that with that kind of like narrow vision on it, and it's then you get what's called confirmation bias. And so I absolutely agree with you. It's important to take that 40,000-foot view, and especially when I was doing the research for this new webinar, I was going like, man, some of this stuff is just so controversial. It's like it's going to require people to really set aside a great deal of investment in certain ideas for them to break those barriers and move into it. So therefore, I have to be very sure that I'm not just up on some weird tangent that's just my own subjective view. But I need to, because you have to be responsible these days. You can't. It's not the same. The bar has changed. The level has changed of putting information out there, and we have to take responsibility for putting things out there more than we ever had. And in the very beginning of of the internet and of YouTube and putting out and talking about conspiracies and deep state stuff, I mean, everyone was throwing everything at the wall, and some of it was going to stick, and no one cared, right? Well, I think we've moved past that now. We're into this zone now where it's really coming down to the last stretch, the final stretch, because the other side is highly organized, and they've now reached a place of technological advantage that could basically usher in what we all don't want to happen. And that's never been that way. It's always been speculative. It's only been in the movies, but we're approaching that last stretch now, John, where I think we're heading into a very, very dangerous territory. So everything we say must count, and everything that we put out there has to carry this frequency of truth, so that because we need to rely on that. Because if we find out now that someone we admire or respect put something out which is way off, or even god forbid manipulated, then every one of us right now that are still standing are the last pillars of something that people are holding on to. We happen to fall in this role. I mean, I don't, whether we want it or not, we're out there talking. So we have to carry this responsibility of making sure that we take that 40-foot thousand view, so we can present it to the people who are looking for truth as well. And they've seen all this other stuff that's falling apart. So those left standing have a double burden now, I think, in my opinion. So you're absolutely right on that. Is that what you're doing too?
I take nature. I go out. I disconnect from everything. I leave my devices behind, and I walk. And that it clears my head from the patterns of thinking that I was just in researching something. But more so, I dive in. I tune in and see how connected am I. Because if I'm connected too much to the world, and not to that truth vibration spirit, the world will yank you any which way, because that's what the world does. That's what it's designed to do, right? I mean, I always liken it to, you drive down the interstate, and as soon as you come into a more urban area, you have a million billboards, you have all those signs. It's like, where am I, where do you want me to go? So that's where it's at for me. what I'm realizing is in our movement, and if I want to call it a movement like freedom, truth, community, there's a great split happening. There are those who have seen um, the business model of this side, and there is a business model that, you know, don't get me wrong, we all got to pay our team, and we got to make sure that we can live, otherwise we couldn't do this. So that's not about what I'm talking about, but there are people who realize the massive potential if you stay within certain parameters and you just talk about subjects in there, that you can reach a huge audience now, and you can make a lot of money with that, and you don't lean here or there too much, you stay within that. But what I'm realizing is there's a split in our community, both on the viewership and on the speakership side. There's a number of people like you are and a few others out there who are simply not willing to settle on another belief system. And I think we can unpack this, Frank. I think we have to define what this world is built on. So how would you, because you and I both talk about the end of the world as we know it. What does that even mean? What does that mean to you?
Well, it has to do, I think, foundationally with how we navigate our reality, each of us individually. And how do we do that, right? We grow up as babies. The first part of it is just getting, whatever we need to survive, food wise, water wise, just to get, to the point where we can, have our first own thoughts, right? That usually happens somewhere near adolescence. And at that point, we start having the option of choosing to believe in something. So it comes down to what we believe is happening around us. And for most people, those beliefs are the foundation of those beliefs have to do, first of all, with their education. They go to school, they start learning, right? That's the first belief that was put on you, right? And I always think that word belief has something very special, because there's another way you could look at it, like belief. You could say like leaves on trees, right? When the tree grows leaves and then they fall off every year and new ones grow, right? So when you're going through your life that way, you grow these leaves, these beliefs, and you might find that suddenly the beliefs don't fit any longer, so they fall off and you grow new beliefs, right? So that's part of education. You learn more and more, and then you realize that's not true and this needs to be replaced. The other belief, of course, is the spiritual belief. And in the Western world, that's of course got to do with the Abrahamic religions, which are the foundation for the Western belief system and spirituality. So there's that. That's very, very powerful. In fact, beliefs in the terms of religion are so powerful. People don't even realize that, how powerful they are, until they're in a clincher situation. Even if you're an atheist, okay, I've seen this myself. Okay, I've been in situations where we're in the middle of nowhere, somewhere, way out in the wilderness, on some weird, I don't know, adventure, tracking something down or whatever, and then you go in a little bit too far. And then something happens that just, you're close to kind of losing it in your pants, right? And I've seen people that are the staunchest atheists run to the Bible and start like, oh, the Bible, and like, oh, forgive me, God, blah, 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 right? Because this is how deep it's seated in our DNA, even to the point, right?
But but also in every worldly institution
It
around
doesn't
us,
matter.
it's everywhere.
It doesn't matter. I'm talking the West here, obviously,
Yeah.
there's other belief systems, right? And the third one, of course, has to do with science, because science is the other spiritual belief religion that's out there. You've got the God religion, and then you've got the science religion, right? They're both cults. They both force you to adopt a certain given set of a rule set, which you have to accept in order to follow their trend and their thought process and their ideology. So they're really not, in fact, it's historically, it's just a fact that religion and science have been like this, since Copernicus. I mean, really, there's this clash that took place. So those two things are still going on. And so those are for me, the three main pillars, that are kind of the beliefs that we have adopted. So it's really all about these beliefs. And so that means that if you decide you're going to you're going to question those beliefs. And I think another factor I should add in here to that while I'm at it is that it's not just that these systems exist and they force you to adopt their rule set and to believe in them. Another element is the framing, right? So if you're in school and you had a teacher that said, what we know about science right now is within this window, and everything that we learn and see on TV is going to be framed within this perspective. But that's only one window. That would be
But
totally,
that's not what they say.
that's
But
not,
that's not what they say.
that's what I'm saying. That would have a totally different effect. Imagine if you were told that by a teacher, as opposed to this is the truth. And they don't show you the frame, right? Like we have a little frame around us right now, right? We're framing something. And I think the new, the pursuit of truth moving forward now to be responsible always has to be put within the caveat that we're framing something here for you to explore. And what it should do in the best case is, if you're daring to risk shattering foundational belief structures, you're only doing it from the perspective of love and the idea that the human experiment has not yet reached its zenith, and what we're seeing out there right now is not going to make that happen. So entertain these ideas within this frame in order to see if maybe you can find something in there which you can safely take out of the frame and say, okay, I see now where I might have actually been duped into believing the frame is reality rather than just a frame. You know what I'm saying? Does that make any sense?
It makes total sense for me, and it's fun. I don't even know if you've seen this, but you're literally using the same words. A couple of days ago, and I think it was on Locals. I talked about the concept of not just reframing, but eventually unframing. So that's what life is. You nailed it. We reframe when we have to, when life forces us to, because either we outgrow something or we're in a bad situation. And in a bad situation, you need to change something. And usually what you eventually end up changing is your belief about something so you can adjust and do it better. And that's sort of how do we cope with life. But that's not the end of it, uh, because that's the cycle that we've been in as a collective for so long. We just keep reinventing our belief systems, but we never ask why. Why are we living on belief systems rather than truth systems or knowledge systems, or what is a belief system there for? And I think it serves the purpose of this awakening or growth process, because you can't get from A to Z in one step. You have to go through the steps. I get that. But what I think is happening in our sort of truth and freedom movement is that after you have gone down enough rabbit holes, you start seeing that at the foundation of those rabbit holes are competing belief systems. Uh, they want you to believe one thing, they want you to believe another thing, and eventually you go, well, I don't believe either. So what's the truth? And I think we're sort of stripping away from every subject. We're stripping away all the falsehoods, all the lies, and what we might expect to happen at the end is what we end up with might be the truth or lead us closer to it. And that, to me, Frank, is like, that is literally the end of the world as we know it, because we've been, if you look at all the atrocities, if you look at all the catastrophes, and if you look at all the bombings and the wars and the and even the little conflicts between people in everyday life that are so everywhere, it's all based on I believe this and you believe that. But when do people how do people sit down and start reframing or even unframing and going, okay, so how do we discover the truth so we could end this once and for all? And I think you're right. We're in this period, we're in this end game. The question is, will we get there before this new reset? Because there's always a reset. We've known this. And can we actually change the path of humanity fundamentally? What do you think?
I don't think there's any way around it unless we want to repeat the cycle,
Hell no.
right? We don't want to repeat the cycle, right? And I think we've been in these cycles, and there's various cycles talked about by various researchers. We know some of them. And, there's grand cycles, there's shorter cycles. But in the end, the cycles are really just, repeat, rinse, recycle, repeat, rinse, recycle. It's like the same MO, because it's got to do with the state of our consciousness. And our consciousness falls into these patterns. And you said, I think the key word you said that I just caught was that you said you're always looking at breaking patterns, at certain routines, to see if maybe you're in a rut, or you actually didn't make the breakthrough, because you're always just accepting. You're sort of stuck in this groove where you think you understand, and you can pedal through and swim through and navigate through reality, but is it really bringing you further? And I think there are those of us who know that that are recognizing and have recognized. I mean, there's no doubt to me, in my mind, that you have already recognized the distortion of truths that have been happening probably for the better part of your adult life. And the same goes for me. And so I was always looking for a way to either, live within my own group of like-minded individuals and family and friends, or just, ignoring that's out there and realizing I've got my truth. They're obviously on the wrong timeline. But we can't do that anymore. It's like now it's like there's a lot of noise from that other timeline, which is threatening to just, put us back into the rinse and recycle thing, because it's actually tearing down society. We're being thrown into this absolute chaos, as it was shown on the Prophecy Rock and Hopi at the end. That timeline at the end goes like this, right? It's like, it's just showing us that it's like up and down and up and down, right? Stock market crash. It looked kind of like a stock market graph, actually. And if you look at the way the money is right now, that's all these things are forcing us into a situation where there's gonna be, if we do nothing and we just kind of coast with it, there's going to be this crash and this recycle. And I think that enough of us now are going, no, we don't want to repeat that cycle, because I think even the universe, as I always say, wants to evolve with us, together with us, into what the experiment humanity was actually destined and made to do. And it's not made to destroy itself. It's not made to have limited thinking and to keep repeating the same pattern. It's actually meant to step into its fullest creator potential, and not on an egoistic level, but on a level of, like, one thing humans do is they work together really well. As we're showing, you and I are on the same wavelength. So we ended up working together whether we wanted to or not. We were brought together. And there's no other way around it. There's no other way to look at it. And these systems are going to start being pushed together, so that we will actually, I think, force a kind of a showdown. And, of course, I have, I'm a pragmatist. Okay. So, I mean, I don't expect, a lot of people before me have thought, I have the idea that's going to change the world and fix it and blah, blah, blah. Right. And they never did. And then the cycle repeated itself. Right. So I'm not, making, I'm not, what do they say in English? Pretending that, everything is automatically going to turn out perfectly. So that's why I decided to call my webinar Time Capsule. Because
just in case, huh? Just in case.
Just in case, right? I mean, it's like, look, what are time capsules, right? There, stick the thing in the ground, because, hey, like, who knows? Maybe people aren't ready for this information now, and maybe the information, and I guarantee you, the information in this webinar is so profoundly explosive that, or implosive. Let's look at it that way.
Let's watch the trailer, Frank. Show us the trailer.
Okay, well, we can do that.
Let's show us the naked truth. Come on.
All right, here we go. Are you ready? Okay, here, I'll switch over.
I'm ready. I'm pumped.
The ideology and even the ethics of Christianity and Judaism from the get-go were corrupt and were nothing but tools for political aims. The thing that each one of us needs to realize is that beliefs drive behavior.
People join forces to conquer empires, to fly to the moon, because they all believe in the same God, in the same nation, or in the same money.
How can we change the behavior of people who are still, to this day, torturing and burning other people in the name of God? We have to look at the beliefs that drive that behavior. This is the big test that we're facing right now, and I think we're in the final phase of that test.
When you go back in time, footnote by footnote, old book and out-of-print book by out-of-print book, you find the history looks very different from the one that most of us learned.
This is history's hardest lesson, where many people have enshrined their sacred values and their sense of human dignity. Judaism, Christianity, Islam is actually not religion at all. It is a political system of social control, brainwashing, and tyranny.
The entire system is based on the fact that everybody believes this story.
The question becomes, who won?
We have to defy and cast aside those belief systems which are being used to decimate the world and to desecrate the earth.
Frank, I think you did it again, my friend. I've seen the trailer before because you sent it to me, and I thought, hey, this is going to be one hell of a ride. It's coming out in July, and for all our wonderful viewers, you said that there's a coupon code, all caps Future Truth, so you can pre-order it now. Links in the description. Hurry! This Frank's giving you a substantial discount until June 1st, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Because I always want to help the people that are in our community, and it's a mutual quid pro quo. It helps me with post-production, and it's essentially, it just energizes the whole project. And I'm willing to, of course, help people that way, and they help me. It's a good trade-off. And so, I do look for. I'm in post-production now. There's still I still have one. Brazing video interview, that I'm still going to do with one of the protagonists that I'm inviting, whose material that I want to showcase in this, because I think it's important here for us to pull together now, and for me to not just go out there and say, well, this is what I found, this is my thing. Yes, it is what I found, but I have to always acknowledge that there are people that have been at this subject and these subjects for a long, long time, and they may not have had the opportunity to step in front of a lot of people. So I want to bring them in as well and have them be part of it, because we're a unified force that are saying, essentially, we're done. It's time to change. We're pulling together. There's power in numbers, and some of these people have been seriously. They've done even to the point where they were arrested. I mean, so you got to realize that the people that are putting it on the line are the kind of people that have the caliber of character, the courage, that they're willing to put their information so far out there that, hey, the cuffs, and not that I want to go to jail or anything here, but I think we're reaching a point now where maybe it's safer to go out with this information now than it ever has been before. And also, I've also noticed in the past that people have gone out with absolutist statements. And so I think it's dangerous to do that. And it's better, like we set this up with the frame, right? We have to understand and explain reality in terms of framing. And so I'm going to be talking to revisionists, like world leading revisionists, okay, that are people that have really put everything on the line, that are going to tell us why revision is important. And we're also going to look at like historical events that are enshrined in humans' consciousness in the Western world, and actually the whole world, with respect to narratives focusing around what took place in the 20th century with the world wars, that shaped and were foundational with setting us up to believe in a certain ideology which has bankrupted us. And I believe that that's where it starts.
This is exactly religion. It's actually this is religion, just in another disguise. But this is exactly the problem that we're seeing when you talk about these subjects. And here's what I'm seeing too. There are some wonderful speakers out there, and even though they were sort of trailblazers in their field, the energy of even 2010 and 2024 is so vastly different. It's like an entirely different universe. And what was divergent thinking in 2010 is very mainstream now. We're branching so far out, but I think what you touched on, like World War II, there's hardly any war that has been more emotionalized and enshrined into culture, pop culture, movie, and everywhere. It's everywhere, and especially if you grow up in Germany and Austria, every freaking theater play to this day has something to do with the Second World War. Every generation is being guilted
Yes.
into through the education system. You go to school in Austria in freaking 2024, and you're still being made. They make you feel guilty for something that they say your ancestor did. So and there's a reason for it. And now we have developments in the world that sort of, when you combine the dots, that show a clearer picture as to the whys of this. But the truth is, even at that level, we have to understand there's still people being played against each other by the same force.
Yes.
And they're using us just to keep fighting. Instead, we should just say, let's just go where the truth leads us, even though it might shatter our beliefs, even though it might shatter what we built our lives on. What the fuck? What are we going to do? And
Right.
and this is what scientism does, right? It goes, here's
Yeah.
a whole system. It provides billions of dollars of grants. It makes sure that everybody lives, the universities live, and everybody, and then somebody comes up and says, and pulls out a piece and says, your whole system is flawed. Look here. This proves it. And then they go, who are you? Go away. Go away. We're not rewriting our system. We're not, we're just going to keep doing what we have been doing because that's where the money comes from.
Yeah, but they don't just want you to go away, John. They, if you pose a bona fide threat, they actually will eliminate you. They'll do whatever they can to move you out of the picture, to get you.
I've sat in the room with judges, with state attorneys, with governors, and all I was doing was explaining their system to them properly. That's all I did. I said, it's not mine. I'm just, here's what your system says. Here's what it actually means. Here's what you are actually there for. And their belief system was shattered. And out of all of them,
you had your Buffalo Kahunas on that day, or what?
No, that was just something we did. That was 15 years ago. That was just something we were doing at the time. It was part of the work that we were doing then. And I there was one guy that seriously went deeper into it, but all of them are still there. All of them have reverted, and they put their blinders back on and said, well, what can we do? Everybody else believes it, so we're just going to continue to believe it too.
Everyone else believes it, so hey, this is cognitive dissonance. This is what it's about. Cognitive dissonance is a psychological term for when people that have seen something which contradicts their belief system, and it so contradicts their belief system that it's uncomfortable for them to adopt this new truth. So regardless of whether it's true or not, if they're forced to have to confront the truth, many people, because it's too much of a bitter pill for them to swallow, will revert back to living in the fiction so that they can be with their social network. And, we're social animals. I mean, we want to be in a socially accepted environment. We don't want to be cast out. I mean, this goes back to cellular memory, when perhaps we were living in the end of the ice age and clamping together in small groups, and those of us who are in a group survived. And if you were kicked out of that group, man, your chances of survival were pretty much zero. So, this is the kind of stuff that we got that was impregnated into our gene epigenetics, they call it, right? Where, essentially you don't change the genes, but you change the way the instruction is carried out. And so we're still operating on this instruction manual based on, hey, if I step out of the comfort zone, I could get kicked out and I'll die somewhere out in the wilderness, right? Of course, we don't have the wilderness anymore, and there's no threat like there was back then. But, how many of us have taken the challenges now? And I think more of us now are coming forward and saying, you know what, we are going to take the challenge. We are going to see what happens, take the risk. Now, of course, try to do it responsibly. I mean, look, those those phrases in that teaser are highly provocative. When you talk about
No shit. You opened so I was like, when I saw that opening line, I was like, damn, Frank, he's
all right,
coming out
here we
swinging.
go. We're coming out swinging, right? This is, I mean, it's a no holds barred, right? We're just going to go for it, right? So this is, and it's not to, you know, and I know people that are in those belief systems they're going to be offended, but I don't want to. It's not about offending somebody, but it's about putting forth an argument to say, okay, well, you got your system, right? Now let's look at the world around, and I'll show you a couple of facts in the material realm that have to do with hands-on, you know, like historical facts that I can show you were completely wrong on. And, you know, and there's no way you can dispute it. It's just black
But
on white.
I don't think that the people that are currently holding those beliefs are the ones who were wrong. They're just the ones who were taught wrong. I mean, it's not, you know, what are you going to do? That's what you were taught.
Yeah, that's
I
the
think,
better way of phrasing it, of course. You're
you
absolutely
know what I
right.
mean?
It's not about
They're,
the individual and not about blame, but it's about adopting. We were impregnated with these beliefs and ideas, and so we accepted them because we do what humans do naturally. They trust, and we believe that the people we respect, that are our leaders and teachers and parents, are telling us the truth. They're not out to manipulate us. That's the diabolical thing behind all of these systems. When, you know, you have to look at who authored it, right? Every time there's an author involved, there's an agenda. And so now all we're saying is, like, you know, you're not bad because you believe those things, but take a look at, you know, the motivation behind the people who authored those things, and look at the world around you today, and can you see that there might be something that needs to be looked at here? That maybe there was something in your in what you accepted, you know, because you're a good person actually, that's using your own, you know, abilities for faith and trust and love and society and, you know, cohesiveness in society against you, to actually impart information on you which has not led you to a better life. In fact, if you look at the world around us, I mean, people are getting by with less money. More people are going bankrupt. There's more. It's like the war never ends, right? The only people that seem to be getting rich and prospering during these chaotic times are those people that are manufacturing weapons and printing money.
well, always the same. I mean, you know, yesterday, and I see these clips every now and then, but yesterday I was looking at, you know, Afghanistan, Iran, those countries like in the 70s, and they were beautiful, like before the
Right.
Islamic revolutions, and they were like you couldn't have told the difference between Portugal, you know, it's slightly darker skinned people. That's why I'm taking Portugal or Spain. You couldn't have said whether that's Barcelona or whether that's Iran or Afghanistan, Kabul. And then the Islamic Revolution came, and it's like now you look at these countries, and pardon my French, but they are under a extreme suppressive regime and belief system,
Right.
and so they had a reset, a literal reset, and now they're I think they're moving towards another liberation period, of course. But we can see this in smaller cycles too. We don't have to go in hundreds of years. We can see this in smaller cycles. But one thing, Frank, that I noticed belief systems and how you came out swinging in that clip. I came out swinging, and I didn't mean to, a couple weeks ago. And I said, I opened a live stream. I said, we're talking about religion today, and I'm gonna. This is a shocker, but apparently God is not in the Bible. And oh my goodness, I mean the
What a
shitstorm that
shitstorm.
erupted. And the
I
thing
couldn't
is that
believe it.
this
I
is not.
saw you. I looked up and you're like, I see this headline. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I'm like, what the heck is going on with John?
No, and the thing is, I
I got to
wasn't
hear
appalled.
this. I'm like, and that, you know, that was the best like clickbait I've ever seen. But
It
I
wasn't
mean,
a it wasn't a clickbait. What I
I know
wanted
I'm just
to
teasing you.
what,
It was actually very heartfelt. But I mean, hey, it was like heartfelt clickbait. I mean, whatever. You know, I know it's not clickbait.
I wanted to convey a concept that every now and then you have to look yourself in the eyes, in the mirror, and say, I'm sorry, I was wrong about this. You have to say it to yourself. You have to let yourself off the hook. If you find truth that contradicts a previous belief system, it's not about the other people first and foremost. It's about you going beyond the shame, the guilt, or whatever, and saying, I was wrong. It's okay. I'm evolving. I'm finding a bigger picture. I think this is the biggest thing, and that's where, I live in a buckle of the Bible Belt. You live in Bavaria, which is deeply Christian. So It's a very similar thing.
They
So
have
if you go out,
crucifixes on every corner here, right? It's like, what do you see? You see a picture of this guy on a cross that's like in pain, right? It's almost like the
yeah,
church is saying, "Oh, you want to challenge the system? This is going to happen to you." It's like,
but
but yeah,
it's enshrined. So a symbol of torture is the symbol of a seemingly loving religion. Let's I mean, just okay,
right,
but
right.
we're
Schizophrenic or
facing the
what?
same thing. If you go out in rural Bavaria and you hold a Bible and you say, "Oh, I've studied this deeply. The omnipotent spiritual God is not in this book. He ain't there." They're gonna still try to cross you, and it's kind of what's happening here. But what I'm saying is somebody did the only sensical thing, is it sensical? No,
Yeah,
sensible. Thank you,
sensible.
sensible. The only
Sensical is the
sensible
word
thing.
too, by the way, but sensible is I think the one you want to say.
Yeah, somebody did the only sensible thing and said he went as far back as he could into language translations and whatnot and said, here are the words here's what these words mean.
Right.
We don't have meanings for certain words, so we shouldn't translate them. And if we do that and we use the scientific method, the real scientific method, we come to the conclusion that the Bible, especially the Old Testament, is not a spiritual text. It's talking about the power structure, the wars, and the political system of the time. And it's talking about a people that have ruled over mankind and how they've done it. The Elohim or the Anunnaki, if you go in the other comparisons, why do you think? Or let me rephrase, do you think that even today you could have like sort of like um, a war against us by the fundamentalists who say you are exactly what the Bible warned us against? Duh, of course it would. And you are the problem.
Yes, you could, but I also think that it all is it's all in the, again, this word framing, it's all in the way it's presented. I think the wars are caused when both sides come out. Yeah, how do we talk about this? Because this is really kind of like, this is what we're looking at right now in society. We've got a situation, in the Middle East, right, where we have two clashing ideologies. And it's like you would think that they could sit down like adults on a table and hash it out, but they don't. They won't. It's not that they can't. It's that they won't. And if you have nowadays, we have the ability to pose an argument to the people who are adherents to and propagators of those ideologies, which are the foundations for this hatred between and division between people. And we can open a discussion that's neutral from a higher plane, meta plane, the 40,000 feet, whatever you want to call it, and say, let's look at this. And we can allow people to see the reactions on both sides, because I think people have a decision when people are invested in the authorities and they see the authorities acting like children in their response, it's going to weaken the argument of the authorities. I think that's clearly what you can see, for example, in the Ukraine, when Zelensky wouldn't sit down with Putin. For me, it was clear, like, these people, they don't want to sit down. And so they will never have my support, because I can't ever get behind any people who aren't reasonable enough to sit down together and analyze a situation neutrally and try to find common ground and leave room for the ability to say, okay, I'm invested in this and it doesn't really deal with yours. But in a way, actually, and this is also true of the Abrahamic religions, there's crossover in all of them. So
Sure, they all come back
right.
from the same lineage.
So you find these crossover points where there's mutual ground. And what happens is, and this is something that, I'm not even going to mention any of the names of the people that are in the webinar, because I want to keep them clear of the energy until I come out with it. Everyone will know who it is at that point. But essentially, it's the idea that if you ask yourself, if you take away the idols that are being, and the symbols that are being worshipped by these groups, what is left, right? I mean, like if you were to remove religion from everywhere, what would be like, what would that mean? What would happen? What would there be to replace what was taken away? And that's where it gets interesting, because when you find out, what you find out here is that what's left is that we don't lack the ability to love one another. We don't lack the ability to help our neighbors. We don't, we don't need to believe in Spider-Man or Superman or whatever symbol is up there for even those people. If those people idols symbolize forgiveness and evolution, well, guess what? We can do that without them. We can just look at it one another as human beings. And okay, you want to jump in? I saw that. Go for it.
I wanted to prove your point. Prove it. From we Christine and I do usually we do 2 seminars a year, 2 retreats, 35 people in a room. Now you can imagine, yes, these people are all our viewers, so there's certain overlaps, but then there's also huge differences in everything. Ethnicity, race, age group, religious backgrounds, belief systems. I mean, 35 people in a room, it always happens. So as long as there's talking going on, and as long as there's sort of the consciousness is at a certain level in everyday consciousness, you will have these, you can see the energies, you can see everybody's in their little corner, and oh, that guy believes this and or that. But then we go into meditation / prayer, so that's silence. So the most that happens is I guide them, 35 people, through a meditation, but a lot of that meditation will be silence, especially towards the end. So now all of a sudden you have 35 completely different people, and they have heart coherence. They are like you and I are vibrating at a similar level. There's peace in the room. There's empathy in the room. There is understanding. There is goodwill. There is love. And there's no reason to fight over anything until the talking gets to a certain point again. But the more often we do it, the more coherence and peace is in the room. So what that proves to me is that it's all the mind bullshit, the belief system bullshit. But at a deeper level, it's so easy for us to connect. It's so easy for us to remember that we are of the same origin. Maybe not all species here, but yeah. Well, have you experienced that?
Well, I can only say that I think that if I envision, what it would be like in a world where there was no clashing going on because of belief systems that are based on faith, then I see that doesn't necessarily mean there's not going to be borders and that every country is not going to have its unique identity. If we're going to go on an international level here, taking it to the 40,000 foot view, it doesn't mean that we have to be like a world without borders. I mean, then we're heading into Klaus Schwab territory. This whole homogenization of sexes, that there is no sex in male and female, is illusion. All these things that are out there, that are these ideologies put on us to try and fracture what they are calling this division between humanity and nature. But it isn't a natural form of being. And the natural form of being is that people in regions that live in certain geographical areas, they adapt to the geography of the region that they're living in, and they develop according to the flora and fauna and what they eat and how they interact, and the temperatures, the climate, and all this stuff. They develop differently from other people in other parts of the world. So there's naturally
according to their needs. That's
absolutely
easy.
According to their needs. So now, if you take away this idea of that there's actually a savior that's going to come and fix their problem, you would have a totally different world. You would have a world where these problems wouldn't exist. There'd be other problems. I mean, human beings, what makes them interesting, and this is one of the things that the great mythologist that I'm working with talks about, is just that the idea of error versus evil. I mean, there's evil in the world, but if you look at if you look at Gnosticism, for example, they don't believe in evil. They believe that there's error. And the further you get away from the error, the more evil thrives. And humans learn from their mistakes. So the sooner we learn from our mistakes, we can put it past us and we can move on. Does that mean we're going to have more mistakes? Of course. Does that mean we're not going to have frictions? Of course we're going to have frictions. But we're great at solving problems and moving past them until someone comes and says, well, we're special and we are going to impose the way on you that you need to be, because we've seen, we've been given instructions from the creator, God himself. And those people are like, well, what the hell is that all about, right? But they have the guns and they have the money, and they force and they realize that, hey, under their feet there's all kinds of gold and diamonds.
Hold on, Frank. Are you saying they have the holy truth by God, but just in case people don't believe that, they also have the guns and the other power? Just, you either believe us or we're going to make you believe. Well, that sounds like the spiritual thing to do.
That's it. And if you trace back the birth of those religions we're talking about, they essentially arose out of the Roman Empire. And what was the Roman Empire really good at? Boom, 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 boom.
Well,
right?
I honestly, I live in a continuation of the Roman Empire. America is a continue on that level.
Right.
And, so Frank, are you a New Ager? I never asked. Are you a New Ager?
I was about, maybe 25 years ago, and then I lost those leaves and I grew new ones.
Because, the thing is, when I go on and I do a live stream about labels and boxes and how we have to transcend those, and how the religious box is another box, and apparently the first thing that people jump to, a lot of people, when I say let's transcend boxes, is try to put me in another box and say, are you a New Ager? And I'm like, no, I there is no label. There are these obvious things that are very obvious. In this incarnation, I'm a guy. I chose to be a husband. I chose to be a father. There's some very obvious things that are in my life, but I'm not any particular label. I don't subscribe to. I personally know my relationship with Source. I know that, and that's me. That's intimate. That's personal. That's none of anyone's business. I have that, and that's all I ever needed to know. In my, everything else comes from that. So how's that for you? Because we're talking about these things, and where do you stand on that?
Well, I look at it as, now that you mention it with the New Age, a lot of New Age ideologies that I entertained in the very beginning when I was like 12, 13, 14 years old. It really is a language. And so what happened, like, for example, when I was now that I'm going through this really cutting edge material and putting together this webinar, I'm realizing, man, how am I going to reconcile some of this information goes so heavily against deeply ingrained, languages of friends and close associates and families. They're never going to be able to accept this. They're going to think Frank's lost it, man. He's gone. This time he's gone too far. He's off the cliff, right?
Well, they're going to put you in a camp, and they're going to say now he's in with those people.
Right. So how do you navigate that, John? Right. What I've come up with so far is this idea of the language. Like I'm looking at, the terminologies, like you mentioned, one of them, Elohim, Anunnaki and stuff like that. There's all these words that are being batted around by people, and they attach their own belief onto them from what they've learned through their own navigation of the matrix. They figured out, the Elohim are this. Oh, the Anunnaki are this, right? Well, I mean, the thing is, if they're wrong, and I can prove that what they think they know about these names is superseded by a more profound and more original knowledge, then how do I, not make them feel like I'm attacking them or trying to rip them or judge them? How do you do that? And I think this is what I've come up with so far, is that you look at it in terms of language, like what you're calling, this, it actually is this, according to this framing that I'm trying to present to you, to help us navigate out of the limitations of the way of defining it as such. Because when we defined it as such, we attached ourselves to, and the word I think here is egregores, which are, artificial energy entities. They can take even the form of a nation, of a person, whatever, that then becomes a force in the world. And that force, and we haven't found many forces in the world that are highly benevolent. So to try and get away from those forces and make them and reach a peaceable, amiable common ground that we look at as human beings together. We're a race of human beings in multiple different species. And we're on this planet, and the experiment is for us to become everything we can be, and we're actually made to be. And it wasn't, we were not made to identify and adopt this rule book and start warring with each other. That ain't the way, man. So it's about language, right? It's about helping people navigate the language of what was put on them to see if maybe there's a way out. But I could be wrong. And this is all I've come up with so far. What do you think?
Well, I imagine either a person who's lived completely removed from society somewhere in the woods, something that has never heard anything about history, what has happened in a civilized world, so to speak, and that would just come out and start to discover. That person has no stake in the outcome, is not part of any particular group, and whatever that person finds, that's what they find. That's what the truth is. So, or an alien comes from a different civilization, has no stake in the outcome, is just exploring our story. To them, however World War II really played out, it doesn't matter to them. They weren't there, and they have no connection to this people or that people. So they're just going to explore, and what they find, that's what they find. We don't have that luxury, because your ancestors are this, and my parents are this, and your neighbor was this, and your teacher was this, and we have all these emotional attachments to stories. Whether they're true or not at the end matters very little, because what matters to us as human beings is, like you say, well, how will that, how will that person feel if I come out and I contradict their entire life's belief system?
Right.
This is what has been the question that Christine and I have been having. And I want to, there's a few people out there who are very straightforward with, this is what I'm finding. I can only show what I'm finding. Now you do whatever you want to do with it. But I don't think we have the luxury to put those feelings ahead or in front of the truth. I don't think we have that. We can, I acknowledge that, and I say, I'm not here to attack you. Ultimately, you choose what you believe. That's up to you. And there's a lot of good things that have come from this religious body. And they've also had a lot of good effects on people. Don't get me wrong. But we're now at this point where I can't shut my mouth just because it's going to make people feel a certain way.
Right. I respect
That's
that.
not
And
possible.
you're helping me a lot, actually, John, watching you out there. And it made me, I had this realization that it's not about the world following one leader anymore, one savior. It's about all of us reinforcing each other and supporting each other and giving each other strength. Because when I hear you talk like that, it gives me the strength to believe that, well, look, I'm not alone in believing this and going out there and having making profound statements which are challenging to the status quo. And if I do it in a way that is, respectful and but still critical, and I pose an argument, then I expect that to come back that way. I think you also get back kind of what you put out. Not in every case. There are some, and there's a lot of narcissism out there. Okay, and this is is another problem that is growing in the world. That there's narcissism rampant, and the narcissist will have a problem conceding his narcissistic tendencies or hers. They end up coming back to, their victim position or whatever it is that they can use to hide. But it's not about, it's about really being bold enough to come forward and respectfully put forth information, because we are in unique times. We have to assume that if the Schwabsters, out there, and the globalists out there are going to succeed at where they're moving us very, very rapidly, we don't have a lot of time left. We have to sell this to a large number of people in a way that makes them go, maybe we should put our foot, at the very least, put the foot on the brake and not just jump right in there and give us the time. I think one of the biggest factors and the biggest dangers, and you can talk to, it doesn't matter where you look, AI or whatever, everyone will tell you the same thing. The problem is these things are moving at a pace where there's not enough dialogue in the public forums for people to understand what is really going on. Because
there is none, not enough. There is none real dialogue. There is none. I remember cloning. I remember GMOs. Those were at least dialogues that were heated in the public space, the media. You know, that at least what's happening, whether it was fake or not, but it was happening. There's no dialogue happening. AI is, it's like, and the advent of this technology is like, just that's reality, friends. It's like they're basically they're doing what they did with the previous world. This is reality. Accepted. You know, you're getting replaced here.
right.
And I'll get a little further than you do, Frank. I say here's the thing, friends. We have months, maybe a few years, maybe, and that's tops. If we don't put a massive dent in this, there's only another, and the other option is not good. The other option is people like you and me eventually, when we're pushed out of this field that we're in because it's being taken over, at least I'll speak for myself. Eventually I'll have to step away because I won't go along with certain things. And eventually I'll have to rely on very primal things to make sure that for as long as possible, my family and I are safe. And I'll do what I have to do. That's not what we want to do. But we will do it. I will not get pushed into this system. I will not get pulled into it, and I will not comply with it. So you can, what happens in your head, how you imagine what I will do on that's probably what's going to play out. That's just how it is. So we're trying to avoid this scenario where we have to go into another all-out fight, but we will if we have to. That's just what it is. But nobody wants that. And it's the thing is, people think it's up to an army, up to a president. No, it's up to you who's watching. It's literally up to you. You decide. You and everyone else around you decides how this is playing out. And that's the kind of power. Do you think are people afraid of that power?
Maybe they're afraid of it. That's one way to look at it. I think people are afraid of their own power, so they make excuses why they can't go out and do whatever it is, write a book, or, you know, learn an instrument, or speak publicly. I mean, I never spoke publicly, and I certainly never spoke publicly in German, you know, 5 years ago. And I would never would have. I mean, you know, I mean, it's nerve wracking to speak in a foreign language and pretend you have authority or some, and put like in a pressure, you know, when you speak. But, you know, eventually you kind of have to get past the excuses and do what needs to be done. And this is something that every one of us is going to have a scale, you know, a measurement of in our own particular lives. Like, where is that border where we put our foot down and say, here and no further, right? This is something that I think it was scary to see the pandemic and the lockdown thing take the direction it did, because that was a clear indication to obviously the cabal that, hey, people's lines are, it's like they're not, you know, putting the line down, right? So, and I think I didn't have the time to really listen in on your thing about the event, but I'm assuming that we're on, you know, par on that as well. That this idea that there's something coming is going to be, if there is an event coming, you can be sure it has to outdo the lockdown by a magnitude of several magnitudes for it to be effective. Because I do not think that, you know, going like this to people to roll up the sleeve is going to have the same impact as it did the first time. So they're going to have to do something much bigger.
Much bigger.
So everything really is at stake right now. It's like the stakes have never been higher, and people need to come out of their comfort zone and take more chances than ever before. And that is the question. Will they do it? You know, will they do it? That's the big question. Are they ready? You know, is the 100th monkey prevalent enough that it'll kick into action when this comes, right?
Let's talk about this event. It's kind of, you know, I think we're, if we take this as our kind of last subject for today, I think it would be a good thing. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree.
So this event, and I made it clear, it's not about prophecy at all, or even prediction. You have to look at the blueprint of the people that are running certain shows, and that's what their blueprint calls for. The blueprint always says we can only do this if there's something that scares the living daylight out of people. So they go, it'll take 50 years unless we have, you know, unless we have a new Pearl Harbor. That's what they said in that document for the Project for a New American Century. And then, well, a few months later, they had their Pearl Harbor, they had 9/11, and they could do all the things. And here's the same thing. 2020 did certain things, but it didn't go far enough, and it didn't do all of it. And they need something else to push people through that last gate into their new thing, into their new system, the new religion, the new order. That's just logic. Look at the blueprints. So how do you get there? Well, now you can let your imagination run wild. What would they do that would be so unprecedented and so scary and so unusual that even critical thinkers would lose their ability to think critically for a while? Because that's what they need. They need panic, fear, and confusion. And here's the thing: most people don't want to think that way because they say, "Oh, now you're starting to create that." No, this is like you watching the armed burglar break into your house, and you just sit there in your chair. Oh, I don't want to envision something bad happening. No, you get the fuck up and you do something about it because he's in the house and he's got a gun. So what do you think? Are we looking at a health thing? Are we looking at a fake alien invasion? Are we looking at just a monumental economic shutdown? Are we looking at cyber? What do you think?
I think there's three things that I've been looking at in terms of an event myself. And I don't know about the blue beam thing and the aliens and all that. I mean, yes, there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk about disclosure. I'm going to be on a panel discussing the world after disclosure and all these things, right? There's the idea of disclosure being that aliens will it'll become officially acknowledged that aliens, some kind of extraterrestrials have existed and are in touch with human beings, etc. And they're going to begin integrating with us. What is that world going to look like? But I don't think that's the kind of event that we're talking about here, because that would actually more or less be a benevolent event in a lot of ways, right? So what I think we're looking at here is things that are visible on the material physical horizon, which are being which are moving ever closer to that tipping point of where they reach an exponential speed. One of them is inevitable. I think at some point it's a massive financial crisis, a financial crash. And I think it was John Peterson contacted me a couple of months back or so and said, hey, you should check out this book by a guy called David Rogers Webb. It's called The Great Taking. And I looked at it, and there was even a little film along with it. And Webb is somebody who was actually a market trader, and he in his own geeky way, he's like the financial market version of you and I in our own respective areas of research. And he cracked the code of the financial game, and he puts it in 72 pages. And if you read that book and you watch that film, you're kind of like, okay. And everything he's going toward, of course, we all land in the same place. Wherever you're coming from, John, and wherever I'm coming from, Frank, and wherever he's coming from, we end up at the same place, which to me has to be the case. If you're on the path of truth, there is a truth. There isn't 1,000 truths, depending on what timeline you're on. There is a truth. And the truth you should find, relative events and things that mirror and mask and reflect your own particular truth. We're having a interesting timing on that one.
Actually, Frank, we're going to edit, but here's what just happened for our viewers. You were just talking about the event that might bring everything to a halt, and you were talking about this economist, and
yeah.
As you were getting to the punchline, boom, you were cut off.
Boom. Well, we're having apparently there's also a lot of weird lightning activity happening in the neighborhood here. So maybe we'll go through this so we can end on a soft landing rather than another. So I'll wrap up what I was saying. I think you heard me talking about David Rogers Webb and The Great Taking. And so
you should land at the same point. That's what you said.
We should all land in the same point. And essentially what he's pointing at with respect to where it's all going with this idea, we hear that Klaus Schwab talking about, you will own what does he say? You will own nothing and be happy, whatever he says, right? And it's this idea of like, how do you get to owning nothing and being happy? Well, David Rogers Webb has actually the meticulously described way and formula as to how that's going to happen. So without going into all the nitty gritty details of it, maybe we can do a special on that sometime in the coming weeks. Essentially what it's moving us toward is exactly that place, the CBDCs. And so I think one of the great, events which might be on the horizon, which is realistic, is the idea of them pulling the carpet from underneath us and taking away our means of subsistence. And that is when people, because if you can't get people to line up and roll up their sleeve for the next Beetlejuice, then, what do you have to give them something formidable. And something formidable in any case is if you take away their money. If they have no longer any money to go out and survive with and buy and exchange with, what happens? Well, they have to adopt and have to accept then the currency that is given to them by the authorities, right? So this is what 90% of the people, and this is why some people think that, the whole lockdown thing was a precursor simulation to see how prepared people are without resistance to accept this new major thing that's coming. And if that's any indication, then I'm sorry, we don't have a lot of hope in hell. But if that happens, it's going to be a monetary thing. So the monetary thing is highly, highly realistic. That's one thing.
I agree. I don't know if it's the only thing. It could be a combination of that and something else.
Well, the other thing that's in the background is this World Health Organization treaty that's trying to get all these countries on board so that when they declare the next pandemic, that they have a fast track toward implementing all of these policies, because they know the resistance is going to be greater. So they needed ministerial help for them to be able to, when they push these things through, when the uproar and the pushback comes, they can hold up the fine print, and they can say, oh yeah, well, it says right there, and you guys had
Your
plenty of time.
Negotiated it.
Yeah,
Your
negotiated, right? And you voted the government. So I'm sorry. And, we're going to have to do this for now. And you can always take the legislative path to try and reverse it, but that's going to take years and years and cost millions of legal fees. So it ain't going to happen, right? So that is another thing that is looming on the horizon. And, with the idea of the next pandemic, and what is that going to be? That is anyone's guess. It could be a climate crisis. They have the power to declare the climate crisis as a state of emergency these days, right? It could be the financial thing. It could be, and it's this thing that that's called the Cobra effect. I don't know if you know what that is. Here, let me put this up on the screen real quick. The Cobra effect, right? It's basically, it was coined by economist Horst Seibert based on a spectacular policy failure in India during British rule. The British government, concerned about the number of venomous cobras in Delhi, offered a bounty for every dead cobra. Initially, this was a successful strategy. Large numbers of snakes were killed for the reward. Eventually, however, and this is the crux, enterprising people began to breed cobras for the income. Of course, like, whoa, there's good money coming here, right? So what is the WHO Treaty? What does that have to do with the WHO Treaty? Well, the WHO Treaty says that, hey, it's every country's obligation to go out and find, possible viruses that are going to come parasitically attack us, right? So countries are going to come up with viruses like they're going out of style, John. And
You
the
collect the
Cobra
money.
effect is going to come into play because they're getting good cash for it, right? So that's another problem. That's why that WHO treaty is more dangerous than anything I think out there. And then the other thing, of course, that the event that's there's a geophysical probability, and this is measurable, and we've talked about this before, that there's a coming pole shift. Okay, a pole shift. Okay, the North Pole becomes the South Pole, and the Earth mass either follows it.
Conspiracy nut, take your tinfoil hat off. This is never gonna happen.
I left my tinfoil out there. I guess but but this pole shift is another thing we could mine and hack into more in depth. But I think we've already been, pumping people's, borders here, boundaries for all these ideas that we're presenting right now. But those are three that I see that are totally legit and totally within the realm of possibility. They're not even, you don't even have to be a conspiracy theorist for these to believe in, for these to come to become reality.
And I'll be quite honest, Frank. I was kind of to wrap this up. When 2020 happened, I've said this before on air. I don't know if it was very well received. I had a level of excitement in me because I've waited for a big event like that because we felt it, we knew the plans, we saw that, and I thought let's just get on with it. I mean, we've been in this limbo state for so long. We've been in this field of research and truth and freedom seeking for so long. So because of still the apathy of a lot of people, the unpopular thing that I'm going to say is bring it on. Let's get it over with. Let's get it over with. We'll do our thing. You do yours, and let's see who walks away the winner. I think it will be Team Humanity. I think this is what we're getting. I'm not in the camp of people who are saying we want to avoid all of that. We need something that's a catalyst. 2020 was a catalyst. As horrific as the fallout was in many ways, we needed it as a society, as a collective, to bring us closer together on certain things and overcome artificial divisions. So there's always that silver lining we have to find in it. Man, what an hour it's been, a little over an hour. I can't believe it. The Naked Truth second edition. How do you feel about this show?
I love it. I love it. This is great. I mean, if I could think of a better show I'd want to be on, I can't. I think,
I love it, brother. Do you think we can, after, I know you got a lot of projects going on right now, but when do you think we can move to 2 times a month?
well, when I told you, I think realistically, probably starting in July.
Because people have been calling for weekly. I don't know that
I
we're
know, and we might eventually be doing weekly. The way I see it, the tempo is going to start picking up. What I sense with this last, we had like 5 weeks now between the last time we recorded, and I sense the potential energy. There's like the exchanges that I have like 100 things I want to just still keep talking to you about right now. So this potential energies there, I love that, right? So, and I think that, and I don't want to lose that. So, I want us to find the balance between enough shows that we keep the energy moving, and not too many that it's like we, ho hum. Although I doubt, it's really going to ever be ho hum. I think the pace of things, the exponential increase in events that are coming at us, and the event horizon, as they call it, is going to increase. And I'm happy to share, on the spot what's going through my mind with you. And I think we're going to always come up with some interesting answers or ideas, and no matter what.
I agree, my friend. Just like you have storms moving through, I have storms moving through here. So let's do this. Let people know, they can support your work by watching the previous webinars, A Tale of Two Timelines and The Inner Looking Glass. But the new one is coming out very, very soon. So if people go to the link in the description, if they use the coupon code Future Truth, they'll save 20 euros. And until June 1st, and they'll support this new webinar that's coming out in July, which I think will be probably your biggest one yet. That's just here, I'm putting this out there. I think it will be your biggest one yet.
Well, that would be wonderful. And, for the sake of moving things, moving things along, I'm going to push some boundaries this time that I never pushed. We had the safety of, that we could distance ourselves from this aspect of a breakaway civilization or, abilities that we have as a human being. None of that is really as provocative as what I'm going to be delving into in this particular one. It's going to be going places that I don't think many people would dare to go. I would dare say. So
I'll go there with you.
Well, I hope you do.
I'm one of those people who can't wait to watch the webinar, and just say that there is none of us that are like up here, and we don't have to go through these experiences. We have to question our own belief systems too. We have dark nights of the soul. We have all of that too, friends. This is a human experience. None of us are immune to that. Or I think it's important that you and I have these experiences too. And it's not like we go, holy shit. I mean, even this was a lie. Even this was a,
right. And one thing you could say, I would add to that, is that right now, and we talked at the very beginning before we went live about HARP, and what I'm noticing more and more is that like this density of conspiracy theories, we have to also move beyond them, because in a way, by presenting us these conspiracies like HARP, for example, what is it telling us? It's giving people the impression that the opposition is all powerful, right? They have, oh, we've got HARP, and boom, 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 right? Well, guess what? Those people that are assuming control of us, that we've given license over control over our society and our living standards and our world and our nations, they're riding a very thin line of sustaining that power over us. And that has to do with us giving them that power through our belief systems. And if we can, you and I can navigate through the rocky pathway to break away all the stones that are basically just illusion or untruths or useless belief systems, and find what's common between every single human being on the planet, then we will fulfill. Absolutely, team humanity is going to win this fight. But it'll only do it if we're unified, if we're together on it. And I think that's what I see our mission as, or that's our little small part of the puzzle, to try and crack that at least that part of it out of the way, so that we pave the way, the smooth way, as little bumpy as possible, for us to make that evolutionary leap.
Boom, Frank, Jacob, you nailed it, my friend. This is and was the second episode of The Naked Truth. It's a little more, we're going back and forth, more banter. It's not really an interview. And there's a lot more to come. Like, Frank and I have been talking about all the subjects that we think are important to talk about. So that's what we're going to do. Strip away the bullshit, the superficial, and just go deep, because that's what the truth is when it's naked. I mean, that's how it presents itself. Brother, thank you so much. I really appreciate you, your time. And this, I can already feel it's going to be an amazing webinar.
Thanks, John. Thanks for making the time for this, and for, just everything you're doing. Just an inspiration to many people, including myself. And, I just look forward to the next time, and be safe until the next time we talk. As you know, I'm going on a trip too. So send your travel angels to be there with us as we're traveling through the cosmos.
Oh, man. Thank you, brother. And Inspire Tribe, thank you so much for tuning in. We love you. We appreciate you. We'll be back with you again very soon.